My name is David, and I've been a recruiter at Google for nearly a decade. I've seen my fair share of unusual interviews, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that day. It started out like any other interview. I was seated at the head of the table in a small, windowless room, the hum of the bustling Google offices just beyond the door. The candidate, a tall, lanky man named Mark, arrived promptly and greeted us with a firm handshake. Claire, my colleague and the lead project manager, and I exchanged pleasantries with him before we all settled into our seats. I began with the usual questions about his recent work experience. His answers were articulate, if somewhat rehearsed, but he seemed competent enough. Claire followed up with more specific questions about technical skills and past projects. Mark responded confidently, and the interview seemed to be progressing smoothly. Then, without warning, Mark's demeanor changed. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting around the room. He abruptly stood up, cutting Claire off mid-question. "You've made it clear that I'm not right, so I may as well just leave now," he announced, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. Claire and I exchanged bewildered glances. Up until this point, the interview had gone well. "No, please, sit down. We were just getting to know you better. There's no need to leave," I tried to reason with him. Mark turned to me, his face twisted with frustration. "I'm not here to be questioned," he shouted. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Claire and I were taken aback. After a moment, Mark stormed out of the room, leaving the door ajar behind him. I shook my head in disbelief. "What was that about?" Claire sighed. "I have no idea. Let's take a break and reconvene in a bit." We both needed a moment to process what had just happened. A few minutes later, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to check Mark's file, hoping to find some clue as to what had gone wrong. As I scanned his resume, something caught my eye, a section about his previous employment that seemed oddly vague. There were no specific details, just a list of company names and dates. I called Claire over. "Look at this. Doesn't it strike you as strange?" She frowned as she read the resume. "Yeah, it's like he's hiding something." Driven by a growing sense of unease, I decided to dig deeper. I searched for his name in Google's internal database, hoping to find some additional information. To my surprise, I found a note attached to his profile: "Do not interview. Subject has exhibited unstable behavior in previous interactions." My heart skipped a beat. "Claire, you need to see this." She leaned over my shoulder, reading the note. How did this slip through the cracks? Before we could ponder further, the door swung open with a bang. Mark stood there, his face flushed with anger. "You think you can just dismiss me?" he spat out. Claire and I stood frozen, the air thick with an almost tangible sense of dread. He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him with a loud thud. The interview room, once just a sterile space, now felt like a trap. "I'm not here for a job," he continued, his eyes wild. "I'm here to deliver a message." "What do you want?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head, studying us with unsettling intensity. "I want you to understand that some people can't be questioned. Some people have secrets that are best left alone." Claire took a step back, bumping into the table. "This is insane. We're calling security." He laughed, a low, chilling sound. "Go ahead. They won't make it in time." As he moved closer, I could see the desperation in his eyes. He pulled out a USB drive from his pocket and threw it on the table. "Take it. Look at it. Then you'll understand." Without another word, He turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind him. Claire and I stood there, shaken and confused. After a moment, I picked up the USB drive, my hand trembling. "Should we look at it?" Claire asked, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, plugging the drive into my laptop. As the files opened, we were met with a series of disturbing documents and videos, detailing unethical practices and cover-ups at various companies. It was clear that Mark had uncovered something significant, something dangerous. We reported the incident and handed over the USB drive to our superiors. An investigation was launched, but Mark was never heard from again. His resume, the note in the database, all of it had disappeared. It was as if he had never existed. To this day, Claire and I never speak of what happened in that interview room. But every now and then, when I'm alone in the office late at night, I can't shake the feeling that Mark is still out there, watching, waiting for his next opportunity to deliver his message. My name is Eder, and I've been working as a software engineer at Google for 5 years. I've always loved my job, enjoyed the challenges, and appreciated the company's culture. However, something happened a few months ago that changed everything, and I can't shake off the eerie feeling that it left me with. It started on a typical Monday morning. I was working on a project with fellow developers, senior managers, and team leaders. Our team was diverse, and one of our key developers, Andrew, worked remotely from his home in Seattle. We frequently had video calls to ensure seamless communication. On this particular day, we had a critical meeting to discuss the project's progress and some pressing issues that needed immediate attention. As usual, we gathered in a spacious meeting room, everyone settled in, and we logged into the video call. Andrew joined the call promptly, but the moment his face appeared on the screen, something bizarre happened. One of our senior managers, Richard, abruptly stood up and walked out of the room without uttering a single word. It was strange because Richard was known for his professionalism and dedication. We all exchanged puzzled glances but decided to proceed with the meeting. Throughout the call, we could see Richard pacing around outside the meeting room, occasionally stopping near the door as if trying to listen in. It was incredibly awkward and unsettling, but we pushed through the agenda and wrapped up the meeting. When the call ended, Richard re-entered the room, his demeanor calm and composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. The tension was palpable, but no one dared to address the elephant in the room. We continued our work, but a sense of unease lingered. Over the next few weeks, Richard's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He started avoiding meetings whenever Andrew was involved and even refused to review his code submissions. This was highly unusual, given Richard's role in overseeing our project's progress. One evening, as I was leaving the office late, I noticed Richard sitting alone in his car in the parking lot, staring intently at his phone. There was something unsettling about his expression, a mix of anger and fear. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. I reached out to Andrew discreetly and asked if he had noticed anything strange. To my surprise, Andrew admitted that he had been receiving anonymous, threatening messages for the past month. The messages were cryptic but clearly meant to intimidate him. He hadn't reported it because he thought it was a prank or some disgruntled ex-colleague trying to mess with him. I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was somehow connected to these threats. I shared my suspicions with a trusted colleague, Emma, who suggested we should look into Richard's background. We discovered that Richard had a troubled past. He had been involved in a scandal at his previous job, which resulted in several layoffs and legal battles. It seemed like he had managed to keep this dark chapter of his life hidden when he joined Google. The more we dug, the more disturbing the revelations became. Richard had a history of mental health issues and had been hospitalized several times for severe paranoia. The most chilling discovery was an old police report indicating that Richard had once been a suspect in a stalking case. The victim, however, withdrew the complaint, and no charges were filed. Emma and I decided to confront Richard directly. We needed to know the truth and ensure the safety of our team, especially Andrew. One evening, we followed Richard to his car after work. As he sat there, staring at his phone, we approached cautiously. When he saw us, his face contorted with rage. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his eyes darting around nervously. "We know about the threats to Andrew," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We know about your past, Richard. We need to understand what's going on." For a moment, Richard seemed to deflate, the anger draining from his face, replaced by a look of profound sadness. He took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice trembling. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he said. "I just wanted to protect my family. You don't understand. They're always watching, always waiting. Andrew, he's part of it. He knows. They all know." His words made no sense, but the fear in his eyes was genuine. Before we could ask more questions, Richard suddenly lunged at me, grabbing my collar. Emma screamed, and I struggled to break free. Fortunately, a security guard heard the commotion and intervened, pulling Richard away. Richard was escorted off the premises and later placed on indefinite leave. We reported everything to Human Resources, and an internal investigation was launched. The threatening messages to Andrew stopped, but the incident left a lasting scar on our team. Andrew eventually decided to leave Google, unable to shake off the trauma of the past few months. As for Richard, he disappeared from our lives as abruptly as he had entered, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a lingering sense of dread. I still work at Google, but things have never been the same. The once vibrant office now feels cold and oppressive. Every time I walk past the meeting room, I can't help but remember that fateful day and the horror that followed. It's a constant reminder that sometimes, the real monsters are not the ones we imagine but the ones lurking in plain sight, hiding behind a facade of normalcy. My name is Ethan Miller, and I've been a software engineer at Google for 3 years. Working at one of the most prestigious tech companies in the world was a dream come true, but what I'm about to tell you turned that dream into a living nightmare. It all started when I was transferred to a new project team. The project was top secret, and only a select few of us were chosen to participate. We were tasked with developing an advanced data analytics tool aimed at predicting market trends with unprecedented accuracy. The project seemed challenging and exciting, but from the beginning, something felt off. Our team leader, Dr. Alan Preston, was known for his brilliance and relentless drive. He had a reputation for pushing his team to the limit, and his intensity was palpable. There was something unsettling about him, though. His demeanor was cold, and his eyes always seemed to be analyzing, calculating. In the first few weeks, the project progressed smoothly. We worked long hours, often staying late into the night. As we got deeper into the development, I started noticing strange things. Files would disappear from our shared drive, only to reappear in different folders. Code would be altered without anyone taking responsibility. It was frustrating, but we chalked it up to technical glitches or simple mistakes. Then, the data anomalies began. The tool started producing erratic and highly specific predictions, not just about market trends, but about personal events in our lives. One day, it predicted that Sarah, a colleague of mine, would have a minor car accident on her way to work. We laughed it off as absurd. But when she came in late, visibly shaken, and told us about her fender bender. Our laughter died. It was too precise to be a coincidence. I brought my concerns to Dr. Preston, but he dismissed them. "It's just a tool picking up on patterns we're not aware of," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Focus on your work, Ethan." His response did little to ease my growing unease. As the weeks went by, the tool's predictions became even more intrusive and accurate. It knew details about our personal lives that we hadn't shared with anyone. It predicted breakups, illnesses, and even trivial daily events with uncanny precision. The atmosphere in the office grew tense. We were no longer just a team, we were subjects in an experiment we didn't fully understand. One night, while working late, I decided to investigate. I accessed the project's deeper logs and discovered something chilling. Dr. Preston had been feeding personal data about each team member into the system data that he shouldn't have had access to. He had been spying on us, using our private information to train the tool. My heart raced as I realized the extent of his manipulation. This wasn't just about creating a powerful analytics tool, it was about control and surveillance. I felt violated and betrayed. I knew I had to confront him, but I needed proof. The next day, I discreetly copied the logs and evidence to a secure drive. I waited until the office was empty and approached Dr. Preston's office. As I entered, he looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. "Ethan, what brings you here so late?" I showed him the evidence I had gathered, expecting denial or outrage. Instead, he simply leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You don't understand, Ethan. This project is bigger than you realize. The data, the predictions, it's all necessary for the future of our work." "Necessary?" I echoed, disbelief and anger rising within me. "You've been violating our privacy, using us as guinea pigs." Dr. Preston's face hardened. "You're too naive to see the bigger picture. Sometimes, sacrifices must be made for progress." I left his office, my mind in turmoil. I felt a mix of fear and determination. I couldn't let this continue, but I knew going to human resources or the authorities might be futile without substantial backing. So, I reached out to a trusted mentor outside the company, someone with influence and understanding of the tech industry. With their guidance, I prepared a detailed report and presented it to Google's ethics committee. The ensuing investigation was intense. Dr. Preston was placed on leave, and the project was halted. The company launched a thorough review of its data privacy practices, and several policies were changed as a result. Months have passed since then, but the experience haunts me. The feeling of being watched, the betrayal by someone I once respected, and the ethical boundaries we crossed it all left a deep scar. Working at Google was supposed to be my dream job, but it turned into a harrowing ordeal that I'm still trying to process.